Welcome, everyone, whether you're joining us for the live version of this webinar or a recording. We're excited to bring the next webinar in the SAA series, this time focused on the future of aquaculture through the eyes of AI and data analytics. And just as a side, I'm particularly excited about this. For those of you who've attended a board meeting, I shared a podcast that launched, was it just this year, Tony? 6 months. A podcast called Fish and Bits. And I learned so much and was excited about that, and decided to reach out to Tony and see if there were ways we could collaborate. And that eventually led to us here today. So he found a few of his founder and tech startup friends, and we're going to try to put on a bit of a show here and actually get to change roles a bit because we have a host of a podcast. I think it's only appropriate that we share the host responsibilities, and Tony's going to help guide through that discussion here today. So for those of you unfamiliar, we have the same, I'm Easton Kaboshik. First of all, I should introduce myself. But just a quick overview of what we're going to go through today. We got a few housekeeping items and acknowledgments of our partners and supporters. Just a few updates. They'll be very brief, and we're going to get right to the meat of our presentation. For housekeeping, all of you are muted if you're an attendee, but we are recording this and we'll share that afterwards. If you have questions, there's a Q&A function, and those will come directly to us as panelists. And panelists, I will manage that and try to share those if they come through. So don't worry about that. And then, as always, this is intended to be rather informal, educational, and really a dialogue. So please do engage and share and ask questions. As always, just a background on SAA. We are an organization funded and led by soybean farmers. And our mission, our mandate is to increase U.S. aquaculture production in particular. And then we create aquafeed solutions with U.S. soy that not only apply to the United States, but really have a global application. So we have a broader soy family in the United Soybean Export Council and United Soybean Board, and then the World Initiative for Soy and Human Health. And that's our footprint all over the globe. So if you have questions, maybe you're not here in the United States, certainly happy to connect you with one of those partners as well. And the way we deliver that mission is primarily through research. About half of our budget every year goes into aquafeed solutions, both maximizing soy inclusion, researching new soy products and their potential, even researching complementary ingredients to soy, and then trying to reduce anti-nutritional factors. So we do quite a bit of research there. Thanks to all of our partners that endeavor in that effort. I know it's a lot of work and it takes a lot of time. And so I just appreciate everyone that participates in that program. Working on a few market development initiatives here, including some work in the Gulf of Mexico. And then we spend a lot of time building aquaculture partnerships, doing education like today, and just a little bit of policy work. Thank you. The way that we're funded and our board is comprised of soybean farmers. So this is really a farmer to farmer organization, right? Our soybean farmers across the country are trying to support and build soy solutions for our farmers in water across the world. So thank you to all of these states: Illinois, Iowa, Kansas, Kentucky, Michigan, Missouri, Nebraska, Ohio, South Dakota, Tennessee, and Virginia. Without their financial support and their leadership on our board, we wouldn't be here today. And then, of course, thank you to the national soy family. That's the United Soybean Board, American Soybean Association, U.S. Soybean Export Council, and World Initiative for Soy and Human Health. The collaboration and partnership with those organizations is also foundational and incredibly important to all the success that we have here today. Just a few updates. We have, for those of you familiar, we publish a quarterly update on all of our research projects. This is just a snapshot of our last quarter. That closes July 1, and so we'll have that put together and published. If you're curious on how all those research projects are going, both at the soybean state level and in the aquaculture, for our aquaculture partners. I really just want to say thank you. There's a lot of work that goes into these, and a lot of institutions that are helping drive solutions. So I always want to appreciate and share my support there. We also have our third now, Aquafeed short course coming up this July, the 10th through 12th at Auburn. We talked about this in our February webinar, and the deadline was April 15th. I was blown away by the interest and support for that program. We had 94 applications from 36 countries. So I appreciate everyone from all over the world taking interest in that. We had a limited group, so we focused on North American nutritionists. But please know that if you were not a North American applicant, we did share those contacts, and the United Soybean Export Council and our teams abroad should be reaching out with resources to help get you what you need and find local solutions for similar education. And then just a big thank you to Auburn University. They've been tremendous hosts. We're looking forward to being there. And Wataya Aqua, our technical partner in planning and delivering that program. That's it. If you do have any other questions, my contact information will be again at the end of the presentation. But I think we should jump in to our panel if y'all are ready to go. Just a brief introduction of our three panelists here. Tony Chen is the CEO and founder of Manolin. I'll have you guys go further into depth in what the company is and what your background is in your opening remarks. So I won't speak directly or read your bios. That's not very exciting. We have Timmy Boulay. I should have asked that beforehand. CEO and founder of Biofin, and then Alexander Stabenow, CTO and founder of Sensor Globe. Again, very excited and very appreciative of this group. We have global talent. We have tech talent. We're on an exciting topic of generative AI, data analytics, and the potential and future of aquaculture there. So with that, I'm going to kick it over. I believe, Tony, you're going to kick us off, and I'll stop sharing my screen so you can share yours, and we'll get to work.
Sounds great. Really happy to be here and excited to share what we're working on, as well as what everyone is doing within the aquaculture space. I'll jump into kind of our company overview. Our company is Manolin, and we're an analytics company really focused on aquaculture data insights. A little bit of background about myself. So I didn't start off in this industry. I am a computer science guy. I studied at MIT and ended up in the government space after college, originally from North Carolina. I was in DC working after college and working on big data systems, but really stumbled into the world of aquaculture personally, found oyster farms and thought they were fascinating. And from there, my co-founder and I, he's my random Craigslist roommate. We discovered aquaculture and couldn't leave, basically, is how we ended up there. We started working with oyster farmers and started seeing the potential of aquaculture around the world, the challenges that the industry faced, how quickly it was growing, how data could really be applied to help farmers make smarter decisions. And that's really what set us off on our mission. We're 6 years into our company. We've been in Norway ever since we founded the business. At that point in time, we made the switch into salmon, recognizing and seeing a ton of data and opportunity. This is a picture from the first time that we actually visited a salmon farm. But I think this is a narrative you'll hear today. A lot of us don't necessarily come from the industry itself and have traveled the world in search of how to make fish farming better. For us, it brought me from coding in government buildings and bunkers into the open ocean, which I will admit is a lot more fun. But yeah, that's a little bit about myself. As far as the company and what we do, we're a data platform powered by AI and advanced analytics, and we're a deep tech company really focused on insights within the industry. And we really support both sides of the business, whether that's for fish farmers themselves or for industry suppliers. And the number of services that we perform go from building disease forecasts, benchmarking products, validating R&D. I think a narrative you'll hear today, and we'll talk a lot more about, is just the opportunities within fish farming. Compared to many other agricultural industries, it's just so far behind, so there's so much to discover. The thesis from our business side is data and intelligence and analytics can only speed up that knowledge. And that applies to both the farmers themselves as well as suppliers across the industry. So we have 2 platforms built out specifically for that. And I'll go a little bit into each one of those, but how we're able to make this happen. And part of the reason why we left the US aquaculture scene and the oyster farmers in the Chesapeake Bay and went overseas to work with salmon is because of the data availability. In Norway, in salmon farming, what we do is we connect up to a lot of farming systems that have been in use for many, many years. Most of the people on this call, I assume, are in the agricultural space. You're familiar with the data that happens and is collected throughout different organizations. What we saw in salmon in Norway was a large amount of information that just needed to be brought together. So that's what we do. We unify data systems. We bring in data from different places. We apply advanced analytics on top of that, and then try to deliver actionable results. And this comes across as largely disease forecasting, analytical tools, industry benchmarks. insights that we aim to help the industry make better improvements in healthier fish. And as far as our platforms, I'll just jump briefly through what we do. And on the farmer side, there's a platform that gives farmers insights. One of the challenges that's unique to aquaculture is when you're dealing with an ocean environment, you really can't quarantine any farm. What happens in one farm flows directly into the next door farm, and there's no way to really stop it. So we provide intelligence to a lot of farmers through our application and along different coastlines, whether that's disease forecasts, alerts, notifications, different types of data cleaning. We support the farmers with the data they're collecting at their sites. Another example of where we're using AI, and we'll dive into kind of our thought process and how we apply it, is on disease monitoring. So like I mentioned, diseases spread. It's very hard to predict when a disease outbreak is going to happen. For us, we're monitoring a ton of different variables being collected throughout the ocean environment, whether that's from remote sensing or from directly on the farm, and package that as different models that we apply to our farmers to give them a little bit of heads up so that they can act a little bit sooner. That's on the farming side. On the supplier side, one of the things that we do is we provide a research platform for large suppliers that provide feed, pharmaceuticals, different products for the industry. Like I mentioned, the industry is fairly new and there's a lot changing. Feed formulations change every single year. Different quantities of what's available changes, and it's very hard to know what works and what doesn't. We're so new into this industry that even large suppliers really don't know what the science of fish nutrition should be moving forward. And we're trying to uncover some of that with the data we collect. We support a large number of farmers up and down the Norway coastline, and because of that, we see a lot of data that's not necessarily siloed, not just within systems, but within companies as well. And we try to uncover that. One of the ways that we've gone about doing that is publishing research studies. So this was one that we conducted last year specifically on the EPA and DHA, or omega-3s, that are needed to be fed to fish in order for humans to have the maximum output from the products that the farmers are growing. Our data set is large enough to have done the largest in-field study ever on this topic, but it really proves the power of what we can do with data and what we're seeing out in the oceans. And as for the rest of the day, I'm really excited to hear more from the other panelists and other companies. I think we're all doing really cool work within this space and excited to share it with everyone else.
Thank you, Tony.
I'll pass it off to, I think Timmy is next.
Hello, everyone. All right, I'm just going to pop up my share screen here 1 second. See if this works. Allow Zoom Workplace to share your screen. Oh boy, sorry about this. Zoom updates. All right.
I can go first if you want.
Yeah, Easton, you want to do that? I'm going to update my Zoom. I'm sorry about this.
No worries.
No,
I'll be back in 2 minutes. Thanks.
no problem.
Always good when we have an AI and tech themed webinar and then there's tech issues.
AI hasn't fixed them yet. We're working on it.
There you go. Next project, Tony.
Yeah, so I'm Alexander Stabino, CEO or CTO, sorry, and co-founder of Sensor Globe. And we're kind of coming from a different angle as Tony and his team. They're coming very much from what I would call a top-down approach. We're coming up from almost a bottom-up approach where we have sensor technologies accommodated by software and analytics that are actually being implemented directly at the level of the farms and fish. So as you can see, one of our products is a very small globe that not only collects water quality, but physical and environmental factors like pressure and acceleration and shock. So it really gives a good overview of what the fish are exposed to when they're being handled, put through various processes or moved from site to site. A little bit about my background is actually came from commercial fisheries. So one of my first companies with my co-founder, Seamus McDonald, we focused on providing kind of business tools to the commercial fishery. I'm from Nova Scotia, the east coast of Canada, just above Maine. So live lobster territory. And we were implementing a lot of kind of off-the-shelf sensors to monitor whenever the lobsters were being held in kind of large tanks. And we started getting requests to kind of monitor when they were in transit in tanks, and even all the way back to the vessels that they're captured on. So we needed to be creative and saw the need to kind of develop one sensor that could not only be used for those applications in lobster, but also in aquaculture. So that's kind of how the company came to be, and now we're solely focused on the aquaculture space. We have our office in Dartmouth, Nova Scotia, just outside of Halifax, and also an office in Oslo in Norway. So what do? We enable salmon farmers to reduce and minimize mortality and product quality loss throughout crucial stages with transport, treatment, and harvest. Salmon are kind of managed by mechanical equipment and processes for a number of different reasons. One is they start out on land as eggs and hatcheries. They're grown out to a certain size traditionally, and then they're transferred to sea to kind of finish their growth and then eventually processed. There's a lot more technology being used to kind of produce the salmon end to end, all on land, which we're also involved in. But really what we're looking to capture is any time those fish are transferred, moved, or handled, they're exposed to a stress, they're exposed to a potential mortality. So our platforms provide actionable insights on how to not only what the fish are feeling through those processes, but also how your equipment might be performing, if it needs maintenance and other things like that. So this is kind of a quick overview of our product line. One is the mobile sensor. It's quite small. The innovation there is we're actually using microsensors. So some people on this call, maybe you're used to kind of, a water probe, and that's kind of in water quality monitoring in general, that's become industry standard to call it a probe. Where I would say we're kind of one of the first companies that's kind of changing the paradigm on how water quality sensors are developed. So this entire ball is about a bit larger than a baseball, maybe closer to a softball. It's 95 millimeters in diameter. Not sure what that is in centimeters, but I think you can get the picture if you know the softball comparison. And that does full spectrum water quality, so dissolved oxygen, pH, temperature, and conductivity/salinity. But it also captures acceleration and shock, as well as vacuum pressure. So water quality can obviously give indicators on if those fish are going through stressful events. Low dissolved oxygen can be an indicator of hypoxic events. Conductivity can also be an issue when they're going through freshwater treatment. So fish will actually go through treatments to remove parasites called lice. That's kind of where a lot of increased mortality and lower quality has been happening in the industry in recent years. As the industry developed mechanical processes to remove lice, it's lowered the quality of overall fish. So that's where we provide a lot of analytics on those processes. Same with acceleration and pressure. If fish are exposed to kind of pressure over an extended period of time, or they hit a pressure quite quickly, it can kill them in some cases, or drastically affect things. So what this means on the other end is they're going to have lower growth rates. They might not feed and kind of retain as much of that feed as possible. So that's where we're really have a direct effect on these farmers' bottom line. The other product that you see here is what we call the crowding companion. So in the industry, whenever fish are moved, they're kind of crowded into one area, and then they go through kind of a pump and a pipe. So this really accommodates our mobile sensor that will actually go through those processes alongside the fish, where historically companies don't know if those fish are stressed until they start kind of bubbling at the surface. So by the time that happens, they're already stressed. So this device allows them to monitor throughout the entire biomass. So as they're crowding, they know in real time where the most density of fish is at any point in the biomass. So they can relieve the crowd, which is currently a manual process, based on the data that they're getting, so they don't stress the fish. Yeah, and this all feeds into a mobile platform, as you can see. So they get that in real time and can see the data and make actionable insights kind of on the spot. But then this also feeds into kind of a web-based platform where they can provide more analytics, more analysis, and kind of customized reporting. So here you can see where actually the red line and the pink line are interjecting of pressure and acceleration. So this is one of those kind of mechanical delousing treatments that I talked about, where the fish are actually being exposed to pressure and acceleration at the same time. So that's kind of a point where, you know, they might be moving pressure through the system to kind of move the fish at an accelerated pace, or pushing them up or down. So this is where it's capturing those kind of critical points within that system. Yeah, and this is just kind of showing the entire process that we monitor. So like I said, they're on land. Wellboats, you can imagine them being kind of the tractors of the industry. That's where fish are transferred. They handle a lot of those mechanical treatment processes, so they have those systems directly on their boat, as well as they even slaughter and process the fish directly on the boat. So our globes will actually go through that entire process, and even to final processing, where if they're experiencing downgrading or bruising in the meat, they'll actually send the globe through to see where those issues might be happening. And we're working with some of the most notable companies in the space. One of the unique aspects of our company is that we're not only working with kind of the farmers, but we also work with the equipment providers, like some of the large wellboat providers like Croy, and as well as the mechanical delousing companies like Smear. Yeah, that's I think a good quick overview. Thanks for your time.
Thanks, Alexander. Just really quickly before we jump over to Timmy, I was curious. You mentioned that you've started or tested sensors on inland facilities as well. Is that true?
Yeah. Yeah, correct. So we actually work with some of the largest land-based companies. Like we were actually just listed in Kingfish's annual report, as well as salmon. We work with Salmon Evolution. So the fish are actually moved even more frequently in land-based facilities because they transfer them from tank to tank as they grow. And they also still receive deliveries from companies that grow them out to a certain point. They're just transferred to their tanks rather than out to sea. So that's becoming a big application for our technology as well.
Do you notice a difference in fish stress or health between, mostly offshore production and then the inland facilities? I'm assuming yes, but I'm just more curious if those globes are showing that.
Yeah, so I mean, not necessarily a big difference in stress. They're kind of, I would classify those as like kind of very different applications. So it's land-based is also kind of quite new. So there's different challenges associated with land-based that you don't get in the sea right now, but it's progressing, and we're actually helping land-based with a lot of those kind of critical procedures that they're developing, even with simple things on how they design the flow of the facility or the pipes and other things like that, to make sure that the fish flow through it nice and easy.
Excellent. For the sake of time, we're going to jump over to Timmy, but Alexander, there are a couple of questions directed to you in the Q&A. So if you read those and maybe type an answer and direct the rest of the audience there as well while Timmy's giving his presentation.
All right, looking more promising now. Sorry
Perfect.
about that.
Welcome back.
Thank you very much. Sorry, just had a Zoom update. All right, well, thank you for having me. I'll set my timer here and try to breeze through this. I know everybody probably just had lunch or is about to have lunch if you're in that part of the country. So we'll try to be efficient. Here's just a quick about me. So I was trained as a medical doctor and environmental scientist. I spent a lot of time in education and in research and in science policy, working at this intersection between human health and animal health. And aquaculture has been a core part of that for the past 10 years. 5 years ago, left my position at the World Bank to start this company, which is a life science focused aquaculture, agriculture facing technology company. And we'll dive in to explain more about that. So we are based in Boston, and what we're doing is pioneering a breakthrough nutrient and medicine delivery platform to really meet the demands of aquaculture and animal agriculture broadly. The problem we're addressing is fundamentally focused around feed. So feed and ingredient challenges in many ways pose an existential threat to this industry. Feed accounts for about 50% of the production costs. I'm sure you know this. About 80% of the carbon emissions. There's all sorts of challenging feed ingredients, which are not always renewable, and there are issues associated with shipping and sourcing. And then there's a lot of market pressures in the industry as well right now associated with sort of supply and delivery of these ingredients. You also know aquaculture, fastest growing food production sector, really exciting, tremendous environmental benefits. I always have to give this slide when I'm talking to investors. You folks probably don't need this, but I think it's great to be reminded of it. Has a tremendously low carbon footprint, of course, very low land use profile, excellent feed conversion ratio, and very high edible yield. So great industry you're working in. However, there are, again, these challenges. I mentioned this in the previous slide, and just a snapshot here of some of the different types of feed that are used in the industry. The feed is comprised of things like this. You get fish meals, lots of overfishing associated with that. In some cases, you have deforestation associated with the ingredient supply. And then you have carbon emissions that are associated with the processing of these ingredients. So how can you address some of these problems, particularly when the industry is moving up in terms of supplying global food sources and these natural resources are going down? So these trend lines are, as you can see, not really aligned. Here is our solution, nanoparticles. These are effectively efficiency multipliers to minimize resource use and reduce costs. You're probably asking yourself, why is this random doctor talking to us about nanoparticles in the context of aquaculture? Well, there are a lot of good reasons, but there's also a lot of reasons related to your health. So nanoparticle science has really evolved over the past 10, 20 years. There's a particular boon. A few years ago, you've probably all had this coronavirus vaccine. It uses a nanoparticle as a delivery mechanism to deliver the mRNA that integrates into your cells and provides you with immunity to the coronavirus. The nanoparticle is just the delivery mechanism. It is the capsule that can be applied to all sorts of things, and is what we're doing with our company. So the core of the technology is this. You take a nanostructure, you surround an ingredient, and then you put that into the feed pellet. And in doing so, you can increase the efficiency sometimes by tenfold of these important ingredients. And this is relevant to this audience in particular, because some of the products that we're using to create that nanostructure can be soy derived, which is really exciting. This is just a snapshot of what some of these different nanoparticles can look like. We're mostly working with these lipid particles and liposomes and micelles. We're not doing quantum dots, not just yet. But there's lots of different forms of nanoparticles. So if you hear somebody talking about this technology, it could really mean many different things. So flipping back to how this ties into soy, this is just a technical slide that's in one of our technical decks. The things to focus on here really is sort of what's highlighted in red, which is the component of soy protein isolate. We've taken some of this stuff you can buy off the shelf. We modified it in some ways and made a really elegant delivery compound to use with some of the products that are already used in the aquaculture space. We put this through some sort of fancy technology, integrate these things together, and then we can deliver it into the feed pellet. This is some of our core IP, which we're using as we sort of build up the company. It has had tremendous results. Using the soy protein isolate particle, we've increased the specific growth rate of fish many times by encapsulating a particularly bioactive compound, which is otherwise not used in the industry. But by putting it into a delivery mechanism, this SPI particle, we've been able to have really nice results. This is just kind of another technical slide, but basically it's demonstrating that we can downregulate genes, decreasing inflammation in these animals, further improving their health. And then this is a sort of a snapshot of whole body impact. The top fish there was provided an ingredient just in its native form. The bottom blue fish was given this ingredient, which is used to dye the fish for demonstrative purposes. And we used a very, very trace amount of this, but put it into a soy protein isolate particle. And you can see the difference there. So the delivery mechanism really has an effect and really gets where it needs to go in the fish. We're building a platform here that can be used with all sorts of ingredients, things that are used in aquafeed, pigments, and omegas and vitamins, other plant-based compounds, and lots of things on the horizon that we can be using. How this ties into AI, there was this great article in the New York Times the other day about how AI is really revolutionizing drug development. This article was specific to humans, but it absolutely has applicability for animals in terms of protein folding and biodiscovery and development of new ingredients. You can use these advanced computer technologies to identify shapes and structures and get ingredients and drugs and vaccines lined up with targets in the body. So this is our company. We're developing these little nanoparticles over there on the left. We're entering through this large $200 billion aquaculture market, but really this can be applied globally to agriculture to sort of feed and treat animals across the agriculture ecosystem. So that's it. I'll turn it back to Easton and Tony. Thanks, guys.
Just that, the nice little mic drop. That's fascinating. So Tony, I think I'm going to turn it back to you and have you do your podcast host duties, and then I'll chime in and be both a panelist and co-host where needed. So back to you.
Sounds great. Yeah, I'm excited to really dive into it. I think for everybody listening, if you guys have more questions, feel free to throw them in the Q&A. The rest of this session, really the next 30 minutes, we're going to go through a couple different topics, and it's going to be more of a conversation. I have a ton of questions for Alex and Timmy, and a lot of them I think are going to be very, very dumb. So feel free to add yours as well. But for me, they both operate in a world that I don't really understand and I'm not experienced in. So I'm really interested to learn a lot. As far as just kind of high level, what we're trying to talk about the next few minutes here, we're going to go into aquaculture a little bit more and why we think the industry is so interesting. I think for all three of us, you've kind of seen it. We didn't come from the industry. We found it. And I think there's a unique perspective from that side. And then we'll dive into data and some of the challenges in collecting data. I think agricultural data is a topic everybody's been talking about, and we have some thoughts on that as well. And then the last two sections, we'll dive into nutrition and feed and then talk about AI specifically. So that's really what the lineup is, but it's going to be fairly open. I'll try to incorporate as many Q&A questions as we can without this or throughout this as well. But just to kick it off, I mean, from both of you, maybe Alex first, how did you end up in aquaculture? How did this swap happen from lobsters and sensors into aquaculture? What makes you so excited about the industry? And then maybe even what brought you to Norway? For all three of us, our companies are primarily operating in Norway, and would love to hear the story as to how you ended up there.
Yeah, for sure. So I think what we were looking at is, we started with commercial fisheries and saw a good opportunity, but started looking at, wider industry data, saw that the growth trajectory of aquaculture, as well as, the sustainability aspects of aquaculture, and, just saw that trending in a different trajectory than commercial fisheries. So it was very much a business decision initially to look at something that could be applied to both and probably even more relevant on the aquaculture side with the focus of a new development in the sensor globe. And then for Norway, again, business decision. Norway, as kind of you guys know, is the major player in the industry. They I don't want to call it a monopoly, but it's pretty close in terms of what they've been able to do with Chile now coming fast and furious. But even Norway owns a good chunk of even the Chilean market. So yeah, just saw them as kind of the industry leaders, and not only that, with a little bit of research, saw that they were also the best at adopting tech. Very much has a culture of paying for things of quality that make their life easier in terms of technology. So a lot of win-wins, very similar. Also culture-wise, coming from the kind of east coast of Canada and working in commercial fisheries, there's a lot of things there. And actually, when we went to Norway, it was during COVID, so we actually had to go to market by partnering with actually ended up being an old family friend of my business partner, Tron Severinsen, who had a background at the executive level at ACFA, which is one of the biggest kind of, I would call it, technology empowered infrastructure companies in the industry. So yeah, what was a need to kind of get into that market. And he helped us kind of initiate our inroads there, and then gained enough traction to kind of hire our first person. And yeah, have just learned a lot about kind of the pain points of the industry. Like anything else, we saw it as just a general tool that would be helpful, but now have really pinpointed where we saw kind of the biggest ROI from the farmers and in tackling the transfer and treatment processes.
Very cool. And what about you, Timmy? I think your story is a little bit even more interesting because you've been around the world, kind of worked in so many different fields. It seems so different than aquaculture. How did aquaculture become top of mind for what you wanted to build?
Yeah, so when I was at the World Bank, it was focused on building programs in planetary health, this interaction between human health, environment, and animals. And that involved investing in infectious disease solutions for human health, but also animal health. I was working some in livestock. Fish came up a number of times. My program was largely funded by the government of Norway. As many of you probably know, Norway's got a lot of cash. They put some of that cash into the World Bank, and then they request that the World Bank redistribute that around the world for projects that they want to see funded. And in this case, it was aquaculture projects. So we started working in aquaculture. I was primarily working in West and East Africa, doing some like tilapia and some other work, and found the industry to be super interesting, and thought, well, I've had a pretty good tenure here at the bank. Why don't I spin out and do something else that's less about politics and pushing around paperwork and more about like cool science and getting stuff done. Also felt like I wasn't fully using the extent of my medical and scientific training. So left the bank 5 years ago and went to Norway. Not at first. I first went to France because there were some opportunities to do some interesting genetic and genomics work, and thought we could sort of dial into that. But ended up in Norway because it turns out it's a great place uh, to to do stuff. There's a lot of money. The industry is super fascinating. And aquaculture, it's sort of really one of the places to be at in the world. The technology is so advanced. They're producing so many fish. It's a great ecosystem to be a part of. And so that's how we ended up there.
Very cool. Yeah, I mean, I think it's very similar to some of the stuff we saw, just the scale and scope of the industry. And not, I mean, Norwegian salmon is obviously at the forefront when you talk about a profitable, successful aquaculture industry. But when you look at the graphs of where everything else is happening, it's in some of these other species, whether it's tilapia, shrimp, Southeast Asia. The rocket ship that started when I looked at the industry maybe 10 years ago has continued. It hasn't been a declining line from the aquaculture side. And there's obviously a lot of challenges and a lot of issues. We've talked about feed, we've talked about disease. I think one of the things that I love to point out to people when we talk about aquaculture is when we talk about salmon, we're talking about 15 generations of fish that have been bred in the history of the industry. It started in 1960s, 1970s, and we really haven't seen the thousands of generations that you would expect from cattle, pork, chicken. These iterations just haven't happened. And that's why there's so much opportunity from both the nutrition, the genetics, the husbandry, the equipment. There's so many areas, and I think that's what excites a lot of us working in the space. But let's jump a little bit in towards data and how we see it applying across the space. And I'll start off with a dumb question before we get into some of the more meaty stuff. Alex, I'm curious. Do you guys ever lose globes? How do you retrieve globes? These cages have hundreds of thousands of fish. These boats are hundreds of meters long, huge tanks, huge volumes. You're talking about finding a softball. I don't know if you have a air tag in them that helps you track them down or something like that, but I'm curious how you find a softball in a sea of fish.
Yeah, so good question. We actually, we're in the several hundreds of globes produced at the moment. I think we've officially lost like two, which is quite impressive. So it's they're moving around. There's a lot of stuff going on through these processes, but they are, relatively controlled, and there's lots of like checkpoints and dewatering tables, and other things that they can be captured on. We put kind of a bright protective cover on it as well, so it's easy to spot. But we've even had like really unique ones. So one of the, I guess, recent developments in the industry is one that they're farming at lower depths than the ocean. The idea is that they can go kind of below where lice are prominent. So they're actually, there's a lot of systems that are harvesting lower. So one of in the actual kind of soft guard that we call it, we can kind of put weights in there to control the buoyancy. So we were actually trying to kind of keep it nice and neutrally buoyant so that it would always float to the surface. In these new applications, we actually have to go the other way. So it kind of just gently will sink to the bottom and then get stuck back up. The other things that are happening is they're actually, even in traditional net pens, they're also sucking up like thick fish or fish that might be kind of lower quality at the bottom to make sure that other fish don't get affected. So yeah, a lot of dynamic applications we've had across a variety of kind of infrastructure, and yeah, knock on wood, nobody's losing them.
That's pretty cool. And I mean, as far as kind of awards, you guys were named kind of most innovative company at Aquanor last year. Aquanor is I don't know what you want to call it, but the largest trade show of aquaculture. It's in Trondheim, Norway. 30,000 people from around the world come there, and your company was awarded the most innovative award. I'm curious as to why you think you guys are not how you guys got the award, but what makes your sensor so different in a way that differentiates yourself from so many others. I mean, sensors are nothing new. Like you said, there's probes, there's ways to measure oxygen and temperature and salinity. People have been doing it for many years. You've mentioned a little bit about your approach to building sensors, but I think you guys also have quite a unique form factor. Curious to hear kind of how you guys break down your thinking as far as developing value for the farms.
Yeah, sure. So there's a couple different levels there. I mean, we'll start kind of from the bottom up, I guess, the hardware design. It literally started from me drawing a circle on the board and saying, like, if we develop something like this and it's compact enough, it can go anywhere. Forget aquaculture being the limit. It can literally disrupt the kind of water quality space. It can fit in the pocket of someone going in the woods, taking environmental readings. They can kind of throw it at anywhere. So at its core, that's kind of what we wanted to do, is really have something that's small, compact. I like to say we have the most sensors per cubic inch on the market. So I guess starting from kind of a modular platform like that really gives us the ability and flexibility to go anywhere in the industry. Like I said, for equipment like a well boat or on a land-based facility. And then from there, it was kind of how we started using the data and looking at the kind of, I guess, wave of quality decreasing, mortality increasing from these increased mechanical treatments. And we originally looked at it as like, okay, this is a business problem. They make a lot of these salmon farmers make a lot of money, but they could be making even more if they kind of tick away at these kind of standard and accepted mortality rates on transfer and treatment processes of 15 to 25%, which we thought was massive based on the size of the industry. So we're like, if we can even take a small percentage point of this and turn it into cash for these guys, that's huge. But kind of our plan is really coming into effect where the industry is actually changing, and they're starting to treat the fish as a living, breathing animal rather than a commodity. And we're starting to see that with regulations as well, where we're getting calls where companies are saying, "Oh, the Norwegian Food Authority isn't letting us implement our brand new well boat because we need to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that it can handle fish properly." Or you can, if you Google a recent article, a fish farmer was, for the first time that I know of, was publicly charged again by the Norwegian Food Authority because they didn't manage a crowding operation effectively. So kind of this I guess, strategy of looking at these things is now coming to fruition in terms of a tailwind in regulation as well.
That's awesome. Yeah. And I mean, I think it makes a lot of sense for us. We love, I think one of the things you've said in other presentations or have it published is about adding data to blind spots throughout the operation. And, you know, from our perspective, when you're raising animals, it's not pieces of a timeline. You can't really operate without knowing the whole history of the animals. We feel like one of the big issues in ag data in general is that you need time series data. It needs to go from day one to harvest. And if you don't have that full picture, it's really hard to find insights. And I think you guys have done a fantastic job on uncovering places where there are stresses to animals, but we are collecting more data to understand what's going on, especially as the industry is continuing to change really quickly. So that data is extremely, extremely valuable. And it's really cool to hear how you guys have built up the company and how you approach kind of the sensor world. If we make a quick swap and start talking a little bit on the nutrition side and more of Timmy's piece, I'm really curious is I think I need some help just to break down exactly what you guys do. If I understand it correctly, you know, one of the issues with I guess biological systems is that you need to make it through whenever you're delivering nutrition to an animal, even to humans, you're trying to make it through the stomach into the small intestine, large intestine, if I remember biology correctly. And there's some challenges, particularly getting, you know, even pills through human stomach acid. Is that essentially where this tech really fits in? Is trying to find how do you actually deliver it? Is it encapsulating it so it makes it through some of these bodily functions?
Yeah, it's a great
am I thinking
question.
about that correctly?
Yeah, you're thinking about that exactly right. So yeah, this delivery technology does exactly what it says. You know, it delivers something. So in Boston, there's a lot of life sciences people. I say I run a delivery technology company. People say, ah, they get it. But like in most parts of the world, that people think that I run like a FedEx or a DHL or something. You know, it's not that, but the premise is the same because you're still delivering one thing from point A to point B. And so what the delivery technology does, it's like you're taking something and you're putting it into a box, right? And that box protects it. And so there's multiple stages of protection. So the first is during the feed production process. So there are some ingredients that you can't really put into like the feed production cycle because there's heat and there's pressure and these compounds can become denatured. But by putting them into a nanoparticle, you could stabilize and protect them. The next step in protection is during the shipping process. So very often these ingredients will have to like sit in the shelf for a while. They could be broken down during that. The particle protects them. Sometimes they may interact with other ingredients. Astaxanthin is kind of a good example of this. It's a big sticky compound. It might stick on other things. And in doing so, you could sort of deactivate it. But by putting that into a nanoparticle, you can protect it. It's like putting everything into its own little sort of carrier so it doesn't get messed up. Then once it gets into the animal, sort of the fish eats this thing, it goes into its stomach. As you said, there's low pH in the stomach acid. That can break things down. That's also not always great. And you can sort of ruin ingredients that way. And they need to get into the intestine where these ingredients are primarily absorbed. And then sometimes when they're in their intestine, the intestine might be inflamed. There may be other things that have ingredients that are preventing the absorption across the gut lumen, getting it into the bloodstream. And this delivery technology sort of protects through that process as well. We've created particles that are pH sensitive. So when they get into the stomach acid, the low pH, they actually tighten up and protect those ingredients even more. And then once they enter into the intestine where there is a higher pH, more basic, they can unwind and facilitate delivery of these ingredients to the bloodstream. So the technology really has multiple benefits sort of across the feed production and the digestion of these animals.
Very cool. I mean, that's truly sci-fi in my mind. I mean, I think one of the kind of immediate follow-ups to that is where are you looking to apply it? And I mean, it makes sense, I think, from a medical standpoint, right? We've done this with human health. We've done this with drug delivery. That makes sense. But as you start to get into animal health, I mean, I think a natural place that people are thinking for fish particularly is vaccines, because we have to inject each individual animal right now to deliver a vaccine. But how do you guys view it? It seems like you're also viewing it not necessarily from just those kind of high cost use cases, but even from a really strong nutrition standpoint. What are some of the blockers to making that happen? I'm assuming cost is one of them, but maybe that's not completely correct either.
Yeah, I mean, it's important to understand that we're really building a platform that has many applications. And so one component of that is the resource use component. So you want to make these resources more efficient. So it could be astaxanthin, it could be fish oil, it could be whatever. Something that's maybe expensive or environmentally scarce. Using this delivery technology, you can just enhance the efficiency of that process. So no need to think about new ingredients, just enhance efficiency, save people money, have lower climate impact, lower environmental impact. That's great. Another application of this is introducing new ingredients that are not used in the industry. So say we find something and fish don't like the taste, you could put it into a nanoparticle and you can make it more palatable so these animals are going to eat it. So that's a great application because there's lots of stuff in the world that would benefit these fish but isn't currently used because maybe it doesn't withstand the production the process, or the fish don't like the way it tastes. Great. And then there are things like vaccines, like you said, currently they're injected. That's not optimal because you can only give these fish these injections like at the beginning of their life cycle. You can't take them out of the water and re-inject them, or you could, but it's costly in terms of animal lives and money. But if you had an oral delivery process, you could deliver these nucleic acids or antigens or whatever kind of vaccine you're using, get those into the fish at any point during their life cycles. So we, in fact, have run a major trial developing an oral vaccine. It looks okay. We still have a little more work to do to sort of engineer that particle, but absolutely that's a major application, because if you introduced oral vaccines to the salmon industry or to the animal agriculture industry more broadly, there's huge cost efficiency there. There's huge efficiency in terms of benefit to animal lives. Yeah, again, we keep coming back to Norway. That's where we've been working a lot. These animals have 15% mortality associated with bacterial infections. And if you could develop a vaccine that could be boosted into these animals over the course of their life, you could bring that mortality down. And save a lot of money and impact in terms of fish that aren't dying of these sort of nasty infections.
Let's talk about how AI may change that process a little bit. Could you, how do you find the right isolates? I mean, you've mentioned kind of soy protein isolate as one of the, I'm understanding that's actually the encapsulation piece. It's not what you are delivering. And you've mentioned to me before in the past on how this is a puzzle. Could you explain a little bit of what goes on and how to break down this puzzle? I'm assuming that's where AI can come in to hypothesize new chemical structures, protein folding, some of those buzzwords as far as how to discover new ways. But is that how it's being applied? How do you find encapsulation isolates right now?
Yeah, so there's two dimensions to our technology, right? One is like the compound, the bioactive compound, and the other is the particle that's surrounding it, that's stabilizing it. In order for that to happen, you need to do some polymer chemistry to see how these things match up. You've got to create sort of biochemical bonds or physical bonds, keep these things stuck together. And so there's many ways this is done. But as you sort of hinted at, there can sometimes be sort of like a lock and key configuration. And if you want to sort of match up encapsulation compound with a payload, you really need to understand that technology. And certainly you could use machine learning, sort of advanced computational approaches to figuring that out, figuring out these shapes. This is an area that's really been advanced in the world of human biomedicine. There's lots that's been done in protein folding and sort of understanding sort of the surface structures of different viruses and cell types and everything else, because that's how these molecules interact with one another in sort of living organisms. And so really, looking to the future, as we build up our platform, and we sort of continue to sort of work in this sort of medicinal vaccine nutritional space, it'll really benefit us and anybody else that's working in animal health or medicine to look to the what's happening and coming down the pipeline in human biomedicine and just cherry pick those technologies so you can apply those same things to these animals. Because at the end of the day, we're very similar to these fish. We're vertebrae, we have sort of cells, we have sort of the same kinds of sort of amino acids. And there's a lot that can be applied using sort of these sort of advanced computational strategies to sort of being more efficient and effective in novel therapies.
No, I think that makes a lot of sense. And I would assume Alex would agree with me there, where, picking inspiration and technologies from other industries is how we're approaching it too. And I mean, if we talk a little bit about AI, I think what I'm really curious to kind of break down in the next few minutes that we have here is to really figure out what's available now, what's coming up in the pipeline, and what may be future, from the AI side, specifically as it applies to aquaculture. I mean, I think from our perspective, right, we've applied machine learning models and AI models towards disease prediction. We apply it towards data cleaning. We apply it in a lot of different ways. Some of the technology is really available, some of it's not. I think one of the things that I've always told people is when it comes to AI and how we think about it, everyone thinks ChatGPT right now and OpenAI and what the big tech companies are doing. And the big thing there is they've had data. The most structured data set in the world is Google search and the internet and Wikipedia, text, video. We've created huge data sets there, but that's not here yet for some of these other industries. I think Alex is collecting a ton of that ground truth data. We're trying to clean up and process it, but that's where we're a few years behind when it comes to really applying the models that they're dealing with at Facebook and Google and applying them towards these industries. We just don't have those same types of data sets. So the problems we're dealing with aren't ready yet for AI architectures. We'll get there, but it just may not be there. But I am curious, from maybe jump back to Alex here on, are you guys using the technology now? Do you see it as far as features you guys are going to offer? How are you guys dealing with the AI component of the world right now?
Yeah, so I mean, it's an important next phase for us. We're currently at a stage where we're providing, a lot of good basic analytics to our customers. But what they still need to do is kind of, sift through the data to find insights and intelligence. So the next phase for us is kind of providing that automated intelligence. So they not only know exactly where to look in their data, or they're automatically shown the important spots in their data without having to kind of go through it. But also that it compares, their equipment, operations, site, everything kind of automatically. So they know as soon as they, do a process or analyze a process, they know if it's in the 90th percentile of all their other processes previously, or it's within the 50th percentile. Just knowing that kind of automatically and in real time is kind of the next phase for us. And then kind of during the crowding processes and other things, I could see kind of camera systems and vision becoming a component of it. There's very few people that have kind of focused on stress. There's been companies that have looked at it, but kind of analyzing fish that breach the surface, which again, in my opinion, is too late. So I could see that also being a component for us is looking at a little bit of vision system, but it also just might be pulling all that data into one and getting kind of new and unique insights that we don't even know yet. I think that's the big thing is like, because we're collecting data that one has never been collected, and two, we keep adding additional sensory adaptations and reiterating the product. I think taking a structured approach and applying AI will allow us to kind of figure out things we didn't even know yet as well.
Do you see yourself applying it, or do you think you'll have to do, foundational AI research as well, as far as developing new models and that sort of thing too?
Yeah, so I think initially we'll be applying it, but who knows what the future will hold. I think a lot of these big companies are doing a lot of general work. So who knows how the kind of app economy and API economy is going to develop out of this. We might be able to kind of piggyback on. But as you've said, we're very few generations into salmon farming, so there might be some kind of wider opportunities to build something from the ground up as well.
Got it. Very cool. And Easton, maybe if you could hop in here. I know we're kind of right at time. Happy to talk a little bit more, but just want to be mindful of the audience.
Yeah, I just want to maybe do a quick lightning round of a few of the questions, and I'll try to synthesize a couple of them. But Scott is asking, with aquaculture being extremely cost sensitive especially in high volume species like shrimp and tilapia, catfish. How are you planning to take this mainstream and make it applicable in commercial farming? And I believe, Timmy, that's directed more at you. And I'm actually going to combine that with the question from Dr. Niehaus, who's talking about the feed increase in costs. So how are you taking that to commercial in those high volume, smaller margin species, and then controlling cost with that kind of technology?
Yeah, great question. So we get asked this a lot. People expect biotechnology to be very expensive, but the reality is it's not. The sort of the compounds that we're using can be quite cheap. Soy protein isolates, very cost efficient, as are some of these other compounds. And if you can increase the efficiency of some of these ingredients by 5 or 10-fold, there's tremendous cost savings associated with that. So we can sort of budget in there and have a slight increase for the additional cost associated with these new compounds, but then the overall efficiency improves. And so in some cases, you can actually bring the cost of the ingredients down. The manufacturing is not that expensive. This is stuff that can be done in a laboratory equipped with centrifuges or a spray dryer or some things that are pretty typical to manufacturing facilities. And this technology already exists out there, this industrial technology, because this tech is so widely used in human biomedicine that there are all sorts of factories that can produce these things for drugs and vaccines that humans take.
Excellent. Thank you. And then, you mentioned a multitude of applications between vaccine and feed and all of that. I guess where does soy fall in that rank, right? Because as a core feed ingredient, and where I'm hearing from you is there's probably some collaboration opportunity around using the soy protein isolate in your technology, your platform, to help reduce some of the nutritional factors for some specific species. I'm assuming that's a partnership that could be discussed on the road, but where does maybe the feed ingredient fall on the opportunity and maybe your shareholder interest?
Yeah. So we're not looking to like replace soy in aquaculture. I mean, I think that there's tremendous value for that in the industry, and that's been proven out. What we're doing is taking sort of one derivative component of that, which is the SPI, because of its pretty remarkable biochemical abilities, and combining that with these other compounds to create these stabilized nanoparticles. So it's almost like there's an additional benefit for soy farmers for using this, because there becomes this higher value sort of like biomedical biotech product that's derivative from the soy industry. So I think it's a great opportunity for partnership, because you're finding new value in that overall supply chain.
Excellent. And then maybe one last question we can wrap up here. I know you're very thankful for all of your time, but Tony, I was curious, you mentioned your work and your ability to take aggregate feeding trials, maybe not necessarily planned, but you're able to put together some analytics behind and answers behind that. And I'm just kind of curious in how deep you go into it, right? So I assume you're testing specific feeds for specific manufacturers across a number of sites and farms. Are you going all the way into the feed components of that, or is that left to that's left to the feed manufacturer? You're on mute.
We largely run sponsored studies, but we do get into the actual ingredients. There's a lot of questions on, how much protein do I need? How much EPA and DHA? How much antixanthin do I need to get commercial benefits? I think one of the things in the industry is people just don't know. There's one thing that happens in a feeding trial and in a lab, but when you take it out to the open ocean, there's so much that can happen. So from our standpoint, we run studies that can go as deep as that. And what we attempt to do is to use our broad data set to isolate the conditions that it happens in. So, just because a farm has had a number of sea lice treatments or a number of stress events that Alex is able to identify, you can profile that and see if you still see a benefit from an additional feed ingredient in those situations. That's one of the big questions is, again, with the farming, so much changes every generation. Farmers don't really know if they change one thing, what's going to happen. The ocean conditions change. You have different external variables that can impact a generation. And that's what we believe big data can be used to uncover a lot of truths in the field.
Excellent. And then last thing, and we'll head out. So we've talked a lot about Norway and the salmon industry, right? And we've also talked about that's a premium product, a premium market, a lot of resources available to make organizations like yours and products like yours successful. How do we scale that to global aquaculture and do that intentionally and in a data-driven way? Because that's a lot of what we wrestle with as, again, the soybean industry is we have a number of species, we have a number of markets, we have any number of challenges, whether it's geopolitical or it's the feed ingredient itself, so on and so forth. And I guess that's where we're looking to make, we have farmer dollars, right? And we're not Norway's sovereign wealth fund, right? We have to be very intentional about how we invest our resources, and we want to make sure that we have the maximum impact for aquaculture and for farmers. So maybe twofold question: how do you see your programs scaling to the rest of the world in aquaculture, and how can the soybean industry benefit from that as well?
I can go first on that one. On the going to the rest of the world for us, and I'll answer another question that was asked of us, and it's how we train our models towards aquaculture. When it comes to ChatGPT, AI, any sort of data analytics, it's all about predicting, trying to do what humans have done, right? So what you're trying to do is imitate something that you see in the training set. And what's important is to be able to validate those models. So for us, we need to validate that data. What happens is actually what's happening. So we need to have a validation data set. And that's why salmon, it makes a lot of sense for us, simply because they have the most data and they've had it for so many generations. When we worked with oyster farmers back in the mid 2010s, we're looking to collect data. We're looking to get that first validation data set when you really need a large amount. That's where OpenAI, ChatGPT will go and see if an answer lines up with an answer within Wikipedia. That's how this feedback system works. That will happen for the rest of aquaculture, but it's going to take a little bit of time. In many of these industries, they've only gotten their first cell phone. They've only started entering things into spreadsheets, in the last 5 or 6 years or so. But as that becomes more available, and I'm sure, sensors and whatnot get deployed, we'll be able to validate that. As it applies towards soy, I think there's, and where you can help your farmers and help the industry, I believe it is a lot on the kind of foundational science level of the industry. People just don't know. We don't have the same type of knowledge in nutrition and how to raise these animals. A lot of these farmers, to be honest, it just worked. 30 years ago, the Norway farmers that we talked to, they put a 6x6 pen off their dock and put some salmon in it and kept them alive. And that's really how this industry started. So being able to uncover those ground truths of what's working and what's not working, there's a lot of that agriculture has had generations to build up that knowledge. We're trying to accelerate that within, a few years here when it comes to aquaculture.
That's a great perspective. Any final thoughts before we get back to our day?
Yeah, I can kind of jump in there in terms of global applicability for us. Norway for us is just kind of the stepping stone. We currently do work in other species like oyster, shellfish. We monitor directly on the leases and kind of combine that data with production data and management data already. So already working in other species, but we also work in other areas. So we do work in Chile, we do work in Japan, we do work in Australia actually. So we want to start with Norway, kind of get scalability, economies of scale with that market, and then look at other areas. I mean, we've already started kind of looking at shrimp and other things where, like Tony said, digitization is going to start to happen rapidly. So as they move from like analog sensors and other things, we're kind of quite well suited for that kind of next step the industry is going to take naturally.
Right. And I just add on top of that, we're just trying to give people stuff that works, introduce technology that will make people's lives easier. And the pathway for doing that is through partnerships. We're just a little startup. I don't know how many of you in the audience have started companies or in the startup industry. It's total hellscape. You're trying to do everything at once, funding and run things and hire people and travel around and get stuff done. And so we're utterly reliant on these partnerships with large organizations that can enable us. And so if we can sort of partner up and team, our technology, our advancements, our sort of functionality with those that have the access, I think that's a recipe for success.
Excellent. wishing you the best, all of you the best in your startups and your companies. It's exciting and really encouraging for the future of aquaculture and the steps that we need to take to get there. I'm especially appreciative for you taking time to talk to our farmers and our aquaculture friends here in the United States. So if there's anything we can do, the soybean industry or our organization in particular, let's be closer friends and perhaps we can collaborate here in the upcoming year. But thanks so much. Thanks on behalf of all our attendees for taking time out of your day. And our next webinar will be in August 22nd at 1 p.m. So save the date there, and we'll hopefully see you then, if not before then. So thanks, everyone. Have a great afternoon.